Welcome back to the Neja Chuan podcast. This is season 4, episode 21. We are continuing with our discussion of Wang Shu Jin, the famous Tai Chi Xingyi Bagua master from Taiwan. We look at two different Bagua Journal issues today. We start with one from, this is volume 5, number 6, where we talk more generally about Wang's Bagua Zhang, his teaching approach, his various trips to Japan and spreading the gospel of internal martial arts. And then we look at a second one from volume 2, number 2, where we look at an interview with one of Wang's students, and he talks about his experience training with Wang and what that was like. Also, if you head over to the Patreon, you can hear an extended episode and a bonus episode to go along with this one. This week, we continue our series on the article Bruce wrote in Inside Kung Fu in October 1992, which set off a little bit of a firestorm in the letters to the editor section, which we get into in the next few episodes. But this one gives the background of the training that he's talking about and, sort of that whole thing. So check that out. Also, if you join up for $10 a month, you get the whole archive of everything we have on there, including all the interviews. So hope you enjoy the episode. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves and be well.
So continuing where we left off on our profile of the famous Bagua Zhang master from Taiwan, Wang Shu Jin, or I should say internal martial arts master, because he was well known for his Xingyi as well and his Tai Chi. We talked a little bit about his history in the mainland before he came to Taiwan and his experience in the Yiguandao religious movement. So now let's talk a little bit about his martial arts training. So this is from the Bagua Journal, Volume 5, Number 6. Wang Shu Jin was very well known for taking full-force blows to the belly from martial artists in Taiwan, karateka in Japan, and even Western boxers. It is said that Jack Dempsey once even tried Wang's belly. So the Dan Miller's informant, Zoe Sen, here, said that in Japan there was a karate practitioner that was famous for his ability to break 20 roof tiles with one strike. He hit Wang's stomach and bounced off like he was hitting a tire inner tube. Although Wang's martial arts practice obviously helped him develop this skill, Zoe Sen said that because Wang worked as a carpenter when he was young, he was naturally very strong before he even started practicing martial arts. When he began martial arts practice, that natural strength he had as a youth blossomed. Zoe said that Wang practiced very hard. When he was practicing in the mainland, they practiced 5 hours every day, and as a rule, his teacher, Zhang Zhaodong, made them adhere to was that during the course of the practice session, they were not allowed to become short of breath or practice with power. So yeah, that's kind of a cool little piece of training from the 1920s when Master Zhang Zhaodong said that you can't train such that become short of breath or practice with overt, harsh power, and yet you're supposed to go 5 hours a day. So,
well,
that's
maybe part of why you're supposed to not use too much force.
Yeah, you'd have to build up and to really do anything for stretches like that. So that's pretty cool that Master Wang passed that down. And as far as the punching and hitting goes, our teacher Kumar said first time he met Wang Shu Jin, punched him and kicked him as hard as he could, and it didn't do nothing to him. And also Robert W. Smith, the famous martial arts author, sent me a picture one time when I was working with him at North Atlantic Books. We exchanged some letters, and he sent me a big glossy 9.5 by 11 picture of him punching Wang Shu Jin in the stomach. And it's a young Robert Smith when he's, a very muscled young fellow who's a Gold Gloves boxer. And he's just step full on lunging step punch to the stomach. And it's clearly doing nothing.
Yeah, I think that was kind of Wang's signature parlor trick, kind of,
Absolutely. And one of the things that Kumar said in his book, that sometimes if he was in a bad mood or you pissed him off, he would do the belly bump where as you punched him, he would retaliate.
Snap his belly back. And
concerning Formosa, which is the other name for Taiwan. So it says Formosan prepares for Lewis's coming. Taipei, Formosa, December 11th, 1951, from the Associated Press. Wang Shu Jin gave his stomach muscles a final workout today. Joe Louis is coming to town tomorrow, and Wang is going to ask the former world heavyweight boxing champion to belt him in the solar plexus as hard as he can. Wang, 47-year-old expert in Chinese style boxing, expressed confidence that he would be able to withstand the blow. The Brown Bomber will put on an exhibition in the Armed Forces Stadium in Taipei. So now the article from Bagua Journal, he talks about the next section mentions that Wang often talked about his teacher Zhang Xiaodong's skill. Wang said that Zhang Xiaodong's Tui show, pushing hands, was especially good. His feet were lightning fast and his movements very smooth. Wang said that Zhang was so quick and his skill was so precise that he was not afraid of anyone, even if they came at him with weapons. Wang had told one story of Zhang Xiaodong being facing off against a small gang of bandits. To demonstrate his strength and skill, Zhang took a horse by the neck with his hands and strangled it to death. After seeing this, the bandits retreated. Wang often admitted that his own skill never even came close to that of his teacher.
That's brutal. Mm, yeah.
But yeah, he's Zhang Xiaodong. So he speaks of his Tui show, which Wang Shu Jin is well known for. And in the
Right.
Patreon, we were talking about his specialty was known for Wang Shu Jin's known for his Tui show. So he must have picked that up in his training with Zhang Xiaodong. So back to Wang Shu Jin. When teaching students, Wang Shu Jin would typically start beginning students holding static standing postures, the Zhangzhuang pose standing method. This was practiced by to teach the students rooting and stillness. From the standing postures, students would then begin to practice Taiji Chuan to learn centering and energy awareness. The Taiji Chuan that Wang taught was the synthesized style developed by his friend and mentor Chen Panling. So that's interesting. So he started with standing and Tai Chi as the beginner's practices to get you rooted, whereas some other people were holding Tai Chi as sort of the advanced thing or whatever. Um, but I think the teaching of standing first is how we learned from Kumar, and that definitely is a nice way to go because I mean, not every school does it that way, but I think for me at that, that helped me get grounded and rooted and really like get a feeling for like some energy to it before doing like movement practices. Wang Shujin began studying this form with Chen shortly after he arrived in Taiwan and studied it for 4 or 5 years before he began teaching it to his own students. Wang Shujin spread Chen's Taiji form widely, both in Taiwan and in Japan. In addition to teaching in Taiwan, Wang Shujin made trips to Japan to teach martial arts and spread Iguan Dao, his religion, the first trip being in 1959. He made numerous trips to Japan before he passed away, sometimes staying for many months at a time. In his first book, Wang indicates that the total combined time he spent in Japan between 1959 and 78 amounted to 10 years. Wow, so over a 20-year stretch, he spent 10 of it in Japan. Interesting. Although Wang taught martial arts in Japan, the main reason he traveled there was to spread Iguan Dao, which he did very successfully. Because of Wang's work, there are now several 100,000 Iguan Daoists in Japan. Wang also had many martial arts converts. Wang's schools still thrive in Japan, and several of his students from Taiwan still make trips to teach in Japan. In fact, Wang taught many more students in Japan than he did in Taiwan. Interesting. Yeah, because there's a really strong uh, Wang Shujin schools of Chinese martial arts in Japan, whereas in Taiwan, the main guy is his student Wang Fu Lai, and I don't think there's a whole lot of other guys that are like, well, I mean, I'm sure there's small groups here and there, but there's not really that public of a presence.
Yeah, I don't remember where we read it, but the basically he had almost like a not a mission, but felt this sort of like responsibility to somehow bridge the like or heal the gap between Japan and China, and thought that martial arts and meditation was the way to do it. So he had
Right.
this like personal mission to kind of connect with
That makes sense.
people in
Yeah.
Japan, you know.
Right, because Japan had like violently and viciously assaulted China for decades. So like
Right. Not
you could be seething with revenge and hate, or you could try to turn that around and say, look, I'm gonna like help these people get over their violent tendencies. And that seems to be
yep.
his approach, which is pretty interesting. And it seems like it really took root, like there's it's and the one thing that we learned, like reading about Sudong Chen earlier a few episodes ago, Japanese people have a great love of martial arts, especially Chinese martial arts. And so they welcomed him with open arms. And I think he also demonstrated his skill in such a way as that Japanese people could respect it. Which brings
Yeah,
us to the
I
next
mean, definitely. I
paragraph.
mean, he was, like taking blows to the belly and shit, I mean, can't
So
deny
here's the
that.
next thing on that. So Wang Shu Jin may be even more widely known in Japan than he is in Taiwan for his martial arts skill. Top-ranking karate masters routinely challenged Wang's skill and were always defeated. As a result, he influenced the study and practice of martial arts in Japan. Today, Chinese martial arts are quite popular in Japan, and Wang Shujing's demonstration of skill, both privately and in public, he appeared on Japanese national television, helped to popularize them. In fact, many of the Americans and other foreigners who spent time studying with Wang either did so in Japan or in Taiwan after having first heard of him in Japan,
Hmm.
which was the experience of Kumar and Marnix when they learned in Japan and they heard about
Well,
Wang.
what's his name? Don Drager
Don Drager, yeah.
was one. He had done some stuff with Wong, and I think he was the first.
In Japan, yeah.
Right. And so I think he was the first Westerner to kind of start spreading the word of like, hey, you guys should, in
Check this guy
Japan,
out.
of like, hey,
Yeah.
you guys should go check out this guy. Well,
Yeah.
he's got something.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense because Don Drager and Robert Smith, like Drager was in charge of Japanese martial arts, Smith was in charge of Chinese martial arts, was their little publishing
Mm,
agreement.
I
So
see.
Drager told him, "Hey, check this guy out when you're in Taiwan, you want to visit this dude."
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, even though they were both judo guys, but
He was a judo guy back then.
right, who wasn't? So it says now it turns on to a little bit more about Wang Shujin's Bagua system and the contents of the system. So it says here that Wang Shujin's Bagua consisted primarily of an assortment of basic exercises that develop foundational skills, circle walking with static postures, set two-person drills, and improvised partner exercises, as well as sitting meditation. And so those are the pieces of the set of the way he would teach. Um, it said also there was the practice of two different forms, Bagua Lianhuanzhang and Bagua Yushenzhang. So you had two sets of palm changes as well.
Right.
So that's interesting. So there's the foundation drills. These are those basic exercise, and some of those are what Kumar gathered to create the opening the energy gate set that we've talked a lot about. Those swings and drilling exercises, cloud hands and stuff. Then circle walking, holding the postures. That sounds like it was a big part of it, as well as two-person drills and sitting meditation is also part of it. That's interesting too, because that's another thing that Kumar often includes in his Bagua teaching is you do your Bagua, but you also then you sit down for a while, meditate, then you get up and do Bagua again. And that sounds like that may have come from Master Wang. So it says beyond those two empty hand Bagua forms, Wang Shujin also taught weapons forms. However, all of the forms practiced was primarily only a template which the students used to develop the proper mechanics of movement and principles of practice. Wang was a very practically oriented teacher and a seasoned fighter. As such, Wang emphasized the principles and usage over the movements when he taught Bagua. So it sounds like, and one of the things that confirms sort of what Kumar said, where he wasn't like crazy about drilling the same techniques over and over. It was more about using the principles to react spontaneously to create your techniques in the moment and let your sort of that's that chi ability of like whatever comes at you, you just respond spontaneously and come up with something from the form rather than memorizing one, two, three step by step techniques so much.
Personally, I think that's where everybody ends up. It's just how you get there. You have two options, right? You can go through This is that thing that in the Lotus you stuff about there was the, sort of you start staccato, then you do it linked, then you do it
Hmm.
smooth, right? And that exists whether or not you want it to, that's how it's going to progress, right? And so there's
Hmm.
a piece of it where if you acknowledge, okay, what I'm trying to do is reach this place of stillness, and then early on start doing things like the sitting and pairing things up and trying to, then you're just addressing it a little bit sooner, but eventually it's going to become part of it anyway. So, it's like different roads to the same, to the same mountaintop, right? Like,
So we're going to continue looking at Wang here in Bagua newsletter, volume 2, number 2 from 1992. Now, this interview is with Huan Cheng Sheng, and he's a student of Wang Shu Jin. And so he talks about his experiences learning from Master Wang. Um, Master Huang started when he was 19. That was back in 1955. The City Recreation Commission put together a class of 30 students and invited Wang Shu Jin to teach. We met each day on Pa Kua Hill in Changhua. That class lasted for several years until there were too few students for Wang to come all the way over from Taichung for. Then a few of us started going to his class over there. I remember it was really rough. My classmate and I would get up at 4 in the morning in order to take a train to Taichung. We would get there to the park, and Wang Shu Jin was teaching about 5 o'clock and practice for an hour before he would arrive at 6. We would then practice until breakfast time, get back on the train, and get back to our jobs. That went on every day for quite some time. We started out learning Zhangzhuang, post stance, and Taiji Chuan for several years. Then we studied Bagua and finally Xingyi Chuan. Students started out with a stake standing to learn rootedness and stillness, and Tai Chi to learn centeredness and channeling of energy. I just wanted to stop there for a second, which is interesting because, like we were saying earlier, he starts with standing in Tai Chi, then Bagua, and then he ends with Xingyi,
hmm,
which is funny because a lot of people start with Xingyi first. Like
right.
Kumar would always say, you got to learn Xingyi before you do Bagua so that you have knockout power before you even bother getting on the circle. But it's true that Xingyi does seem to be the final piece of Wang Shu Jin's system.
Yeah, I mean, who knows, man? I think it probably depends on when you get the guy, right? Like what stage of life they're in. I
Hmm.
think as people get older, Tai Chi tends to become more of the focus. When you're younger, it's more about the Shingi and the Bagua because that's where the action is, right?
Yeah, well, and when you think back to Kumar's teacher in Beijing, Liu Hongjie, he did Xingyi every morning first thing. Then he did Tai Chi and Bagua, depending on
Right.
his mood. So, like,
Well, but and then at a certain point, he stopped doing the Shingi and started doing God's Playing in the Clouds as
hmm,
his morning routine. So, even he got to a point where it was like, you go even more towards just quality of life, not, martial arts.
Neigong, yeah, Neigong can take the place of a lot of that stuff and fill that role. So, here, returning to this article about Huang Qinsheng, he says, I only learned about one-fourth of what Master Wang knew. He was very deep. I learned the internal arts out of interest and for health. I never intended to teach. Therefore, I was not interested in learning everything he knew. For example, I did not much care for Shiggy. There was too much running around, so I did not learn it all. This is too bad, though, because much of Wang Shujin's martial arts came out of Xingyi. So there you go, Xingyi being at
Well,
the
see,
root
yeah,
of
and
Wang
that's why
Shujin.
that's why I say I think maybe at that time Shingi was kind of um that was the one you got to do the most martial arts in essentially.
Probably
But because of that, you had to do all the other stuff first, right? Because you didn't want to just jump in and get your ass kicked. You had to train a bit first.
makes sense. So he says that Wang Shujin was taught by Zhang Zhaodong in Hebei province. Zhang was famous for his Bagua Xingyi. In fact, he invented a movement in Xingyi called the Lightning Fist. Curiously enough, Wang Shujin once told me that it was Zhang Zhaodong's classmate who taught him. I do not know if this was just being polite or not. I do know that he had the utmost respect for Zhang Zhaodong. This is the type of humble remark you would expect from my teacher. He had other teachers, but rarely spoke of them like he did Zhang Xiaodong. So there he's confirming that Wang wasn't an indoor disciple or whatever, but that he learned from the student.
Yeah.
Um, he says Wang Shu Jin's friends included Chen Panling, who taught Tai Chi and Bagua, and another Bagua and Xingyi teacher in Taipei, Zhang Junfeng. Wang and he were sworn blood brothers, although they were not of the same teacher. Wang Shu Jin had many other friends and colleagues that I do not know well. He began traveling around Japan to investigate the martial arts taught there. He was challenged many times, but he was never defeated. Once, even a swordsman tried his luck, but my teacher disarmed him. The Japanese just couldn't cope with the soft and circular movements. But he was not all soft. Many karate stylists and even some visiting Western boxers tested his stomach, all to no avail. He made many trips to Japan and even established a school there. I am now told that it's run by Japanese. When it comes to Bagua, all of the basic exercises, we learned all the basic exercises first. Then we learned the 8 changes and the Bagua Lianhuan linking palms. After that, we were taught the Bagua Yushen swimming body. Bagua Yushen Zhang is an older and more advanced form. Beyond that, we learned Bagua weapons forms. I do not want to put too much emphasis on the forms, however, because Wang Shu Jin was an excellent fighter and his teaching was very practical. He passed down exactly what was taught by his teacher, but he emphasized the more useful aspects of the art. So again, he emphasized that Wang Shu Jin liked to teach the principles and fighting concepts rather than being a super stickler for the form movements.
Well, and that's where I think some of the E-Trend influence comes into it, right? Because
Mm.
um that seems to be sort of what he did was with all of his martial, because E-Trend is kind of a modified way of doing Xingyi with a little bit of like a Tai Chi flavor to it. So this idea that if you take that combination of a little bit of Xingyi and a little bit of Tai Chi, or a lot of Xingyi and a lot of Tai Chi in his case, right? And you start merging those two, it's going to give you most of what the Bagua has. And so if you start mixing in the Baguas in there somewhere,
Mm.
all those things kind of merge into whichever one you pick, right? So it sounds like with this guy, he sort of viewed the Shingy as the one that he had, you know, wished he had more of. Bruce, clearly it was the Bagua that he wished he had more of, So I think, again, I mean, some of that is, I think, what your teacher's teaching at the time,
Yeah, that's always a factor.
that's a huge factor. I mean, I
Right.
don't know if I would have studied Xingyi if Bruce hadn't had been teaching it at that time. It was
Right.
like,
That
oh,
was the class. So you walked in
yeah,
and that's the class you
exactly.
do.
So
He says to talks a little bit more about Bagua. First, there's the walking. You do not really step as you do in regular walking. The movement comes from the sacrum, almost as if someone had a hand on the small of your back, pushing you forward. You should sink your energy and move forward with purpose. There's no chance steps. With every step you make while walking the circle, you should be able to uproot an attacker. My teacher was like this. If you came in contact with him at any time when he was playing Pagua, you stood a good chance of being knocked down. In stepping backwards or forwards or spinning, there are no superfluous movements, no transitional movements. Every move should have an attack or a defense. In turning, you should not place your foot or turn it from the ankle or even the knee. You should make all turns from the hips. As you turn the hips, the feet fall naturally. So the interviewer asks, what's the most difficult thing to learn about Bagua? To me, it is lo kong, to fall into emptiness. And kong is that
right,
word
right,
for
right.
emptiness that we've discussed ad nauseum in Baihua's book.
Yeah.
It's a Buddhist term for emptiness. For example, the Bagua practitioner is like a typhoon in a microcosm. The eye of the storm, or the dantian, is still and empty. All the movements rotate around it, although it is never disturbed. The strong winds surrounding the eye, or the sacrum, drive the outer arms, such as that the Bagua practitioner's own shoulders, arms, and legs are set in motion by the turning of the waist. If an opponent attacks with a powerful strike, you fall into emptiness and let him hit air. His own inertia will defeat him. I am small, so if I used power against a more powerful opponent, it would be like hitting an egg with a rock. hitting an egg against a rock. Better to entice the rock into your center and send it spinning off into space. There are movements in Bagua which are centripetal and allow the opponent to fall inward towards your center, only to be propelled outward again by centrifugal motion. This sort of movement can be found in Wang Shu Jin's single palm change. When I first started studying internal styles, a Shaolin boxer ridiculed my form for being too soft. He then launched a strong attack, which I, without thinking, just absorbed and sent him sprawling to the ground. This was my first real awakening to the use of emptiness. It was fun. In fact, several of my classmates entered a sparring competition put on by some Shaolin boxers after practicing with Wang Shu Jin for about 6 months. We were learning Tai Chi then. Well, they all won their first bouts easily. The Shaolin people were unhappy, so they changed the rules. No more stepping backwards. Our students then held their ground using their push hands technique, which we all knew at the time, and still won the second round of matches. In the finals, they changed the rules again. No pushing allowed. That's all they knew. So we did not have much of a chance after that. But it was right then and there that we began to appreciate the internal styles in Wang Shu Jin's no-nonsense teaching. So what does that tell you about internal approach to combat?
Well, I think it's that. I mean, the emptiness part is essentially it's the transition from one direction to another, right? So the idea that there isn't a snap, right? That your movement is continuous, and so in that moment of transition, how do you go from, going towards yourself to going away from yourself, right? And this, so again, I think in some ways he, emphasizes the standing in the circle walking over the straight line drills, right? And so you did some of that in Xingyi, but once you got to the point of Bagua, this emptiness became the focus, right? This ability to
The eye of the storm, that's what he calls it. Yeah.
yeah, but it's that what's the eye of the storm? It's your center line, it's your
Right.
diamond, right? So this idea,
Sacrum Dantian, yeah.
yeah. So again, there's a lot of things that go into training how to quote unquote use your lower dantian in Bagua Zhang that I think it's very useful training, but it may not be your quickest route to doing martial arts. It's more the
I mean, these guys were beating Shaolin after 6 months, so that's pretty nice to see.
right.
Until they changed the rules on them.
Sounds like what they were using was mostly pushing hands
True.
techniques, right?
Which has that same sense, obviously.
Sure,
The
yeah.
center, your center is empty, and then you let them push themselves
It
past
doesn't
you on
have the
either side.
striking though, and it sounds
Right. You're not allowed to push.
right. And it
Like, God
doesn't. It
damn it.
sounds like once they couldn't, once they couldn't just push the guy, they couldn't handle
Right.
the striking part.
Right.
So everybody's got their limitations, but that's it. That's kind of a interesting perspective on it.
All right, well, let's cut it there. Master Huang Chen Sheng has a bunch of other interesting things to say about Wang's teachings that are quite enlightening. So I think we'll finish that up next time.
All right, sounds good.
All righty.
Hey folks, hope you enjoyed that. Just a reminder, go over to Instagram. You can see images to go along with the episodes. And again, if you want to head over to the Patreon, it's $5 a month for the basic membership. $10 a month gives you the full archive. And you get a extended episode and a bonus episode to go along with each episode. So check it out. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves and be well.